The rain tapped against the window of my small room at Sunshine Meadows Retirement Home. Not exactly the cheerful paradise the brochure had promised. More like a waiting room for the inevitable, with its antiseptic smell and beige walls that matched the beige lives we were expected to lead. I sat in my wheelchair, not because I couldn't walk, I could, with a cane on good days, but because they insisted. Rules and regulations. Liability concerns. I stared at the framed photograph on my nightstand. My late wife, Margaret, smiling on our 40th anniversary. Next to it, a family portrait from 15 years ago, my son Robert with his arm around his wife Diane, my daughter Emily with her then husband Steve, and their children. All smiling. All pretending we were the perfect American family. The perfect American lie. My name is William James Harrington. I'm 68 years old. I spent 45 years building a construction company from nothing but calloused hands and stubborn determination. I put my children through college, helped with down payments on their first homes, and never once complained about the sacrifices. Because that's what fathers do. Or at least, that's what I thought fathers did. It's been 14 months since they dropped me off here. 14 months of weekly visits that dwindled to monthly, then to holidays only, and finally to nothing at all. My last visitor was Emily, 3 months ago. She stayed for exactly 22 minutes. I timed it. The nurse says you're not taking your medication regularly, Dad, she had said, her eyes never meeting mine, fingers constantly checking her phone. The medication makes me foggy. I don't need it, I replied. She sighed that familiar sigh. The one that said I was being difficult again. The doctors prescribed it for a reason. You had a stroke, Dad. You need to follow their instructions. It wasn't a stroke. It was a minor TIA, a transient ischemic attack. A warning, not a catastrophe. But they had all latched onto the word stroke like it was a golden ticket, the perfect justification for what came next. I had been living alone in my house for 3 years after Margaret passed. Managing just fine. Sure, the place was too big for one person, and sometimes the silence was deafening. But it was my home. The home where I had raised my family, where every scratch on the hardwood floors and every dent in the wall had a story. Then came the family meeting last year. Robert and Emily sitting across from me at my kitchen table, faces sullen as funeral directors. Dad, we've been talking, Robert had started, his voice practiced and smooth, the same voice he used to close deals at his investment firm. After your episode, we don't think you should be living alone anymore. Episode? I had laughed. You make it sound like I had a psychotic break. The doctor called it a mini-stroke, and even that's an exaggeration. You were disoriented, Emily chimed in. You couldn't remember your address when the paramedics came. Because I was in shock. Anyone would be. Dad, Robert leaned forward, using his reasonable voice. The voice that always preceded unreasonable suggestions. We found a really nice place. Sunshine Meadows. It's not far from Emily's house. They have medical staff on site 24/7. A nursing home? I had felt my blood pressure rise. I'm not going to a damn nursing home. I'm not invalid. It's a retirement community, Emily corrected quickly. With graduated care options. You'd have your own apartment. No. Dad, be reasonable, Robert's voice had hardened. What if you fall again? What if next time it's worse than a TIA? You'd be alone for hours before anyone found you. I'm getting a medical alert system. Problem solved. They exchanged that look. The one that said they'd already decided everything. There's also the financial aspect, Robert continued. Your medical bills are piling up. The property taxes on this house are ridiculous. We've run the numbers. We? I interrupted. Since when do you have any say in my finances? Another look between them. Emily and I have discussed it extensively, Robert said carefully. The house is worth at least $850,000 in this market. If you sell it, that money would easily cover your stay at Sunshine Meadows for years. Plus, you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance, utilities, property taxes. And there it was. The real reason for their sudden concern. My house. My biggest asset. I wish I could say I put up more of a fight. That I told them to get out of my house and never come back. But the truth is, I was tired. Tired of being alone. Tired of rattling around in a house full of ghosts. And maybe, deep down, I thought that if I agreed to this, they might visit more. That we could rebuild whatever had broken between us over the years. Fool that I was. They had it all planned out. The realtor was already selected. The papers for Sunshine Meadows already filled out. My signature was the only thing missing. Just for 6 months, Emily had promised. If you hate it, we'll find another solution. Another lie. I signed the papers. I sold my home of 35 years. And I moved into a 400 square foot room at Sunshine Meadows, bringing only what would fit in the limited space. Family photos. Margaret's favorite reading chair. My collection of vinyl records and the vintage record player that had been a 20th anniversary gift from my wife. The rest, furniture, tools, books, the physical remnants of my life went to estate sales or donation centers or, in many cases, quietly disappeared into my children's homes. My antique desk now sits in Robert's home office. My leather recliner in Emily's den. The house sold for $875,000. The money went into an account that Robert helped set up. For your care, he'd said. Sunshine Meadows costs $4,200 per month. The math should have left me with a substantial cushion. But here's the thing about moving to a place like this: once you're in, you lose control. Bit by bit, decision by decision, your autonomy slips away. First, it was the medication schedule. Then the structured mealtimes. Then the suggested activities that were less suggestion and more mandatory attendance. And somewhere in there, I stopped asking about the money. Stopped questioning the bills Robert would bring for me to sign. Stopped wondering why my bank statements never seemed to arrive anymore. Until today. The envelope had come in the morning mail. Addressed to me, but it had been opened. Sunshine Meadows staff often helped residents with their mail. For our convenience, they said. Inside was a bank statement. Not the regular monthly one, but a quarterly investment summary. One I'd never seen before. It showed an account in my name with a balance of $3.2 million. $3.2 million. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of the numbers. This couldn't be right. I had never had that kind of money. The house sale, yes, but that was less than $1 million. Where had the rest come from? Then I remembered. The life insurance. Margaret's policy and mine. We'd taken them out decades ago when the children were small. $500,000 each. The premiums had been painful in the early years when money was tight, but we'd never missed a payment. When Margaret died, I received her payout. I hadn't needed it then, the construction company was doing well, and I had my own savings. So I'd invested it, intending to leave it for the kids eventually. Had it grown this much? No, that didn't add up either. Even with compound interest, Margaret's policy wouldn't have ballooned to this amount. I flipped through the pages, trying to understand the transactions listed. There were deposits from sources I didn't recognize. Investment returns from funds I'd never heard of. And a company name that kept appearing, Harrington Holdings LLC. I'd never formed an LLC. Never created a holding company. But Robert had. He'd mentioned it once, explaining how he was protecting his assets through a corporate structure. Smart business, he'd called it. The last page of the statement showed recent withdrawals. Large ones. $50,000 to Chandler Preparatory Academy, the private school where Robert's twins attended. $22,000 to BMW Financial Services, likely the lease on Emily's new car that she'd bragged about during her last visit. $175,000 to RH Real Estate Development, Robert's side business that he was trying to get off the ground. My hands began to shake, but not from age or weakness. From rage. Pure, clarifying rage. They had taken everything. My home. My independence. My dignity. And now, I discovered, my money as well. Money that was meant for my care. Money that should have been mine to control. They had declared me incompetent enough to need full-time care but competent enough to sign financial documents. They had isolated me from friends and neighbors who might have asked questions. They had counted on my trust, my love, and perhaps my declining health to get away with it. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated me. I looked again at the photograph of Margaret on my nightstand. Her kind eyes. Her determined smile. They think I'm finished, I whispered to her. They think I've given up. I folded the bank statement carefully and slid it under my mattress. Then I wheeled myself to the door and down the hall to the community room where a few residents were watching a game show on the shared television. Nancy, one of the day nurses, looked up as I approached. "Mr. Harrington. Good to see you out and about. Would you like to join the group for some TV?" "Actually," I said, giving her my best charming smile, "I was wondering if I could use the computer. I'd like to email my children." Of course, she beamed, pleased by any sign of healthy social engagement she could note in my chart. "Let me log you in." As she led me to the ancient desktop in the corner of the room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: purpose. Clear, driving purpose. My children thought they had locked me away to be forgotten. They were about to discover how wrong they were. This wasn't just about the money, though that was galling enough. This was about justice. About consequences for betrayal. About teaching them the lesson I had apparently failed to instill during their upbringing: that family means something. That trust is sacred. That actions have repercussions. They had left me in this place to wither away while they spent my money. But I wasn't dead yet. Not even close. As Nancy walked away, I opened the email program and began to type. Not to my children, no, they wouldn't hear from me directly. Not yet. Instead, I wrote to Gerald Winters, my attorney for the past 30 years. The man who had handled my business affairs, who had drawn up Margaret's and my wills, who had known us since Robert was in diapers. "Gerald," I typed, "I need your help. And I need your absolute discretion. I believe my children have been embezzling my funds while keeping me isolated in a retirement home. I have evidence. Can you visit me tomorrow? There's no phone privacy here, so please just come. And please, don't contact Robert or Emily. William Harrington." I hit send and sat back, my heart pounding like it hadn't in years. The game was on. For the first time since they'd abandoned me in this place, I felt truly alive. Sunshine Meadows thought they were housing a docile old man waiting to die. My children thought they had neutralized a problem. They were all about to learn how mistaken they were. I had built a successful business from nothing. I had overcome competitors who tried to crush me, economic downturns that bankrupted others, and physical challenges that would have sidelined weaker men. I had survived the loss of my beloved wife. This betrayal? This would not break me. It would be my renaissance. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Sleep had been elusive, my mind racing with plans and contingencies. I needed to be careful. Strategic. If Robert or Emily got any hint of what I was doing, they could move quickly to further restrict my independence. I dressed in my best clothes, not the sweatpants and loose shirts that had become my Sunshine Meadows uniform, but proper slacks and a button-down shirt that Margaret had always liked. I combed my hair neatly and even put on the cologne that had sat unused on my dresser for months. Appearances matter. Perception matters. I needed Gerald to see me as the competent businessman he'd known for decades, not as the diminished elder my children had portrayed. At precisely 10 a.m., Nancy knocked on my door. "Mr. Harrington, you have a visitor." "A Mr. Winters?" "Thank you, Nancy. Could you please show him in?" Gerald Winters looked much the same as when I'd last seen him at Margaret's funeral. Thinner, perhaps. More gray in his mustache. But his eyes were still sharp behind his wire-rimmed glasses, his handshake still firm. "William," he said warmly, taking the chair I indicated. "It's been too long." "Too long indeed," I agreed, closing the door to ensure our privacy. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Your email concerned me greatly." His expression turned serious. "You mentioned embezzlement?" I retrieved the bank statement from beneath my mattress and handed it to him. "Take a look at this. An account I supposedly control, yet I've never seen statements until yesterday. And these withdrawals," I pointed to the transactions I'd identified. "Private school tuition. Car payments. Robert's real estate venture. None of this is for my care." Gerald studied the document, his frown deepening. "This is troubling. Very troubling. When did you first learn about this account?" "Yesterday. When this statement arrived. It was the first I'd heard of Harrington Holdings LLC or any investment account of this size." "And you never authorized these withdrawals?" "Never. I haven't authorized any financial transactions beyond signing the checks Robert brings for my monthly care here. He told me the house sale barely covered the costs." Gerald's expression darkened. "The house in Oakwood?" "That property was worth close to $1 million. $875,000, I confirmed. Plus whatever remained of my savings and Margaret's life insurance payout. I never expected to be wealthy, Gerald, but I certainly should have more than enough to cover this place without going broke." He nodded, continuing to examine the statement. "Who has legal authority over your finances currently?" "That's just it, I don't know exactly. After the TIA last year, I signed some papers. Robert said they were just to allow him to help manage my affairs while I recovered. I never intended to sign over complete control." "Do you remember if you signed a power of attorney document?" I closed my eyes, trying to recall. Those days had been confusing, not because of my mental state, but because of the barrage of decisions and documents thrust at me. Possibly. There were several legal documents. Robert assured me they were standard precautions. Gerald took out a small notebook. "I'll need to investigate this thoroughly, William. If they've established a power of attorney under false pretenses, or if they're abusing that power, we have legal recourse. But I need to see all the documentation first." "How do we get those documents without alerting them? I can't risk them knowing I'm onto them." "Not yet." "Leave that to me," Gerald said, his voice taking on the confident tone I remembered from our business dealings. "I can request copies of all legal documents pertaining to your estate directly from the county records. Powers of attorney must be registered. As your longtime attorney, I shouldn't raise any red flags." "And the LLC? Harrington Holdings?" "I'll search the state business registry. If Robert formed it using your assets, there will be a paper trail. And if he used your money to fund his own ventures without proper authorization, that's textbook financial exploitation of an elder. A criminal offense in all 50 states." For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not just anger, not just determination, but actual hope that justice might be possible. "What do you need from me, Gerald?" "For now, patience. And discretion." Continue as normal. Don't let on that anything has changed. I'll do some preliminary investigation and come back in a few days with a clearer picture." He paused, studying me. "William, I have to ask, what's your goal here? What outcome are you seeking?" I looked at Margaret's photograph, considering the question carefully. What did I want? Revenge? Punishment? My money back? Justice, I finally said. I want them to face consequences for what they've done. I want control of my life and my assets returned to me. And I want them to understand the magnitude of their betrayal. Gerald nodded slowly. That's reasonable. But I should warn you, family legal battles can get ugly. Are you prepared for that? They stopped behaving like family the moment they locked me in here and stole my money, I said, my voice steady. I'm prepared for whatever comes next. All right then. He stood, straightening his tie. I'll begin immediately. You should hear from me within the week. In the meantime, is there anything else you need? Anything I can do for you right now? I thought for a moment. Yes, actually. Can you bring me a prepaid cell phone? One they don't know about? The phones here are in public areas, and I suspect my calls may be monitored. Of course. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card. My direct line is on here. Call anytime, day or night, if something changes or if you think of anything else that might help our case. After Gerald left, I sat quietly, staring out the window at the manicured grounds of Sunshine Meadows. Residents in wheelchairs were being pushed along the paved paths by attendants. Some by choice, others, like me on my first days here, by institutional insistence. I had allowed myself to be pushed. To be guided. To be controlled. Not anymore. That evening, during the mandatory social hour in the community room, I was more engaged than I had been in months. I played chess with Mr. Donovan, a retired mathematics professor who had been trying to befriend me since my arrival. I made small talk with the nurses. I even ate the bland meatloaf in the dining hall without complaint. Nancy seemed delighted by my sudden sociability. It's wonderful to see you participating, Mr. Harrington, she said as she checked my blood pressure during the nightly rounds. Your children will be so pleased to hear you're adjusting better. My children, I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Yes, I'm sure they would be. In fact, she continued, making a note in my chart, your daughter called today. She mentioned they're planning something special for your birthday next month. Isn't that nice? My birthday. April 15th. I'd almost forgotten. Yes, I replied, maintaining my pleasant facade. Very nice indeed. After she left, I lay in bed considering this new information. My birthday hadn't been acknowledged last year, my first at Sunshine Meadows. What had changed? The answer came quickly, $3.2 million had changed. Somehow, they must have realized I'd seen the statement. Perhaps the bank had notified them that a duplicate had been sent to my address. Perhaps someone at Sunshine Meadows had mentioned my meeting with Gerald. Either way, they were suddenly remembering my existence. How convenient. This development required adjustment to my plans. I needed to be ready for their visit. To prepare properly for whatever scheme they might be hatching. 3 days later, Gerald returned as promised. This time, he brought not only a prepaid cell phone but a thick folder of documents. The news isn't good, William, he said gravely after we were alone in my room. Robert has been very busy. He spread the papers on my small desk. First, there's this. A durable power of attorney, signed by you last year, giving Robert complete control over your financial affairs. It's legitimate in the eyes of the law, properly notarized, properly filed. I examined the document, recognizing my signature at the bottom. He told me this was temporary. Just until I got back on my feet. Unfortunately, there's nothing in the document indicating any time limitation. It's a full durable power, effective immediately upon signing and continuing indefinitely. Can it be revoked? Yes, if we can establish your current mental competence. Which leads me to the next issue. He pulled out another document. This is a physician statement, signed by Dr. Marcus Collins, stating that you exhibit significant cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia. What? I felt the blood drain from my face. That's absurd. I've never even met a Dr. Collins. I thought as much, Gerald nodded grimly. I checked his credentials. He's a real physician, but he works primarily with Robert's investment firm, handling executive physicals and wellness programs. A clear conflict of interest. So Robert got his company doctor to diagnose me without ever examining me? That's fraud. It is. And it gets worse. Gerald pulled out more papers. Harrington Holdings LLC was formed 6 months ago. The articles of organization list you as the primary member, but with Robert as the managing member with full operational control. Your house proceeds, insurance money, and retirement accounts were all transferred into it. I stared at the documents, my hands shaking with anger. All without my knowledge or consent. Exactly. And these bank records show systematic withdrawals for expenses that have nothing to do with your care. Private school tuition. Luxury car leases. A vacation property in the Poconos. Home renovations. Robert's investment schemes. How much? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How much have they taken? Gerald's expression was grim. By my preliminary accounting, approximately $780,000 over the past year. The amount hit me like a physical blow. Nearly $800,000. My children had stolen nearly $800,000 from me while leaving me in a budget nursing home, believing I was nearly destitute. What can we do? I asked after I'd collected myself. We have several options, Gerald replied, his tone shifting to the professional confidence I needed to hear. First, we need to get you an independent medical evaluation to counter this fraudulent dementia diagnosis. I've arranged an appointment with Dr. Eleanor Kim, a highly respected geriatric neurologist, for next week. She can come here to avoid raising suspicions. Good. What else? Once we have medical evidence of your competence, we file to revoke the power of attorney. Simultaneously, we can file a civil suit for financial exploitation and begin criminal proceedings if you wish to go that route. And in the meantime? While all this is happening? Gerald hesitated. That's the difficult part. Legally, until the power of attorney is revoked, Robert still controls your finances. We can try for an emergency injunction to freeze the assets, but without hard proof of ongoing exploitation, it might be difficult. I considered this challenge. What if we had proof? Incontrovertible evidence of their intentions? That would certainly strengthen our position. What did you have in mind? I told him about Emily's call, about the sudden birthday plans after months of neglect. They're coming because they found out about the statement, I explained. They want to make sure I don't cause problems. This visit is damage control, not genuine concern. Gerald nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. And you want to use this visit to gather evidence? Exactly. If I could record them, get them to admit what they've been doing. Recording without consent is legally complicated, Gerald cautioned. In many states, it's inadmissible in court unless all parties consent to being recorded. Pennsylvania is a two-party consent state, I acknowledged, having dealt with this issue in my construction business. But what about notes? What if I took detailed notes immediately after our conversation? Would that be admissible? Your contemporaneous written account would have some weight, yes. Not as strong as a recording, but still valuable. especially if you can get them to make specific admissions about the money or their intentions. Then that's what I'll do, I decided. I'll play along. Let them think I'm still in the dark. And I'll document everything. Gerald looked concerned. William, be careful. If they suspect you're building a case against them. They won't, I assured him. They think I'm a senile old man. That's their weakness. Their blind spot. They've convinced themselves of their own lies. We spent the next hour developing a strategy. Gerald would expedite the medical evaluation and prepare the legal documents to revoke the power of attorney as soon as we had Dr. Kim's report. He would also draft the civil complaint for financial exploitation, ready to file the moment we had sufficient evidence. In the meantime, I would maintain the charade. The compliant father. The declining patient. All while meticulously documenting every interaction, every admission, every piece of evidence that could be used to build our case. As Gerald prepared to leave, he handed me the prepaid phone. My number is programmed in. Call anytime, day or night. And William. He paused, his expression grave. Are you certain you want to pursue this? It will likely mean the permanent fracturing of your relationship with your children. I looked again at the family portrait on my nightstand. The smiling faces that masked such callousness. The relationship is already broken, Gerald. They broke it when they put their greed above their decency. Above our family bonds. I met his gaze steadily. I'm not doing this out of spite or anger, though God knows I feel both. I'm doing this because there must be consequences for betrayal. Because some actions are simply unforgivable. He nodded, understanding. I'll be in touch soon. Stay strong. After he left, I sat for a long time looking at that family photograph. Then, deliberately, I placed it face down in the drawer of my nightstand. The next 2 weeks passed with excruciating slowness. Dr. Kim came as promised, spending nearly 3 hours conducting a thorough neurological and cognitive evaluation. Her findings were unequivocal. I showed no signs of dementia or significant cognitive impairment. My memory, reasoning, and executive function were all well above average for my age cohort, according to her report. Mr. Harrington, she had said as she concluded the examination, I'm frankly baffled by the previous diagnosis in your medical records. Your mind is sharp. Your recall is excellent. There's simply no clinical evidence to support a dementia diagnosis. Thank you, doctor, I'd replied, not bothering to hide my satisfaction. That's very good to hear. With Dr. Kim's evaluation in hand, Gerald began preparing the legal documents to revoke the fraudulent power of attorney. But we still needed more evidence of deliberate exploitation to strengthen our case for the civil suit and potential criminal charges. That evidence, I hoped, would come from the birthday visit. As the day approached, Sunshine Meadows buzzed with unusual activity. The staff had been informed of the special celebration and seemed almost as excited as if it were their own family coming. Nancy helped me select my best outfit from my limited wardrobe. The dining room was reserved for a private party. The morning of my birthday, I woke early and followed my usual routine. Breakfast in the dining hall. A short walk around the grounds, using my cane rather than the wheelchair. A game of solitaire in the community room. All the while, I was rehearsing in my mind. Preparing for every possible scenario. Every question they might ask. Every explanation they might offer. They arrived at 11:30 a.m. Robert, Emily, their spouses, and all 5 grandchildren. Bearing gifts wrapped in bright paper. Carrying a store-bought cake. Wearing their Sunday best and practiced smiles. Happy birthday, Dad! Emily exclaimed, leaning down to hug me as if we had the sort of relationship where hugs were commonplace. We've missed you so much, Robert added, clapping my shoulder with just the right amount of affection for the watching staff. The grandchildren hung back, clearly uncomfortable. They hadn't seen me in over a year. The youngest, Emily's son Jason, barely seemed to recognize me. "Well, this is a surprise," I said, maintaining a pleasant, slightly bewildered expression. The doddering old man they expected. "What a lovely cake." "Only the best for you, Dad," Robert beamed, directing his wife Diane to set it on the table. "Chocolate with buttercream. Your favorite." It wasn't. Margaret's coconut cake had always been my favorite. Robert knew that, or should have. But such details were insignificant to them now. "Thank you," I said mildly. "It's wonderful to see everyone." "Jason, is that you? My goodness, you've grown." The boy nodded shyly, still hiding partially behind his mother. "Why don't we all sit down?" Emily suggested brightly. "We've got presents." The next hour was an excruciating performance. They asked about my health with practiced concern. They shared carefully edited updates about their lives. They encouraged the children to tell me about school and sports and hobbies. Not once did they mention the money. Not once did they reference the bank statement or explain the withdrawals. Their entire visit was a carefully choreographed display of familial devotion, designed for the benefit of the watching staff. I played along. I opened their gifts: a robe I didn't need, slippers I wouldn't wear, a digital photo frame already loaded with family pictures, as if I couldn't manage such technology myself. I thanked them effusively. I asked appropriate questions about their lives. And I waited. The opportunity came as lunch concluded. Nancy approached the table with a bright smile. "Mr. Harrington, it's time for your medication. And then perhaps you might want to rest? It's been quite an exciting morning for you." "Actually," Robert interjected smoothly, "we were hoping to take Dad for a little drive. Just around town, to see some of his old haunts." "Would that be all right?" Nancy looked uncertain. "Well, residents are supposed to sign out formally, and we'd need to prepare his medication to take along." "We won't be long," Emily assured her. "An hour at most." "And it would mean so much to him, wouldn't it, Dad?" I nodded, feigning eager anticipation. "Oh yes, I'd love to see the old neighborhood." Nancy relented, as I knew she would. The staff were always eager to accommodate family involvement, especially for residents like me who rarely had visitors. 20 minutes later, I was settled in the back seat of Robert's Mercedes, with Emily beside me. Robert drove, with Diane in the passenger seat. The grandchildren and Emily's husband had conveniently been sent home in the second car. "It's so good to get you out of that place for a bit," Emily said as we pulled away from Sunshine Meadows. "How are they treating you, Dad?" "Well enough," I replied noncommittally. "The food's not great." "You look good," Robert observed, watching me in the rearview mirror. "Better than last time we visited." "Do I?" I kept my tone light. Must be the birthday excitement. There was a brief, awkward silence. Then Emily reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "We have one more gift for you, Dad. Something special." I accepted the envelope, already guessing what it contained. Inside was a brochure for Silver Palms Luxury Senior Living. "We've been thinking," Robert began carefully, "that Sunshine Meadows might not be the best fit for you anymore. Silver Palms is more upscale. Private rooms twice the size of what you have now. Better food. More activities." "It looks very nice," I said, examining the glossy photos of spacious apartments and smiling seniors. "But I imagine it's quite expensive." "Don't worry about that," Emily said quickly. "We've worked everything out financially." "Have you?" I looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "That's interesting, because I was under the impression that my funds were nearly depleted." That's what Robert told me 3 months ago when I asked about possibly moving to a different facility. A quick glance passed between them. Robert's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Well, the situation has improved, he said smoothly. Some of my investments have performed better than expected. Your investments, I repeated. Or mine? Another silence, heavier this time. Dad, Emily began, her voice taking on that special patronizing tone reserved for difficult elders. You know, Robert has been managing your finances since your stroke. It's complicated. There are tax considerations, investment strategies. It seems very complicated indeed, I interrupted mildly. For instance, I'm confused about Harrington Holdings LLC. When exactly did I authorize its creation? The car swerved slightly before Robert regained control. Who told you about that? A bank statement was delivered to me. Quite by accident, I assume, since I'd never received one before. $3.2 million is a significant sum. Especially for someone whose children told him he could barely afford basic nursing home care. Complete silence filled the car. I could almost hear their minds racing, calculating, formulating explanations and excuses. Dad, Robert finally said, his voice steady but strained, you're confused. We've discussed Harrington Holdings several times. It's a legal structure I created to protect your assets from potential healthcare costs. To make sure Medicaid couldn't take everything if you needed long-term care. Interesting. I don't recall those discussions. Perhaps it's my failing memory. I let the irony hang in the air. I also don't recall authorizing withdrawals for private school tuition, BMW leases, or vacation properties. Emily made a small, choked sound. Diane stared rigidly forward. Those are temporary loans, Robert said firmly. All properly documented. All being repaid with interest. You agreed to help with the grandchildren's education. You told us you wanted to. Did I? How generous of me. Especially considering I believed I was nearly broke. Robert pulled the car abruptly to the curb, putting it in park. He turned to face me, his expression a mixture of anger and apprehension. What exactly are you implying, Dad? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You used a questionable medical diagnosis to gain control of my finances. You transferred my assets into an LLC you control. You've withdrawn nearly $800,000 for personal expenses unrelated to my care. And you left me in a budget nursing home believing I couldn't afford better. Emily began to cry, but they were calculated tears. I'd seen the same performance when she was caught shoplifting at 16. How can you say such things? After everything we've done for you? Do you know how hard it's been, managing your care, visiting when we can despite our busy lives? Visiting when you can? I laughed without humor. Emily, your last visit before today was 3 months ago. You stayed for 22 minutes. I timed it. Robert hasn't been to see me in over 6 months. We call, she protested weakly. No, you don't. Not unless you need something signed. Robert's face had hardened into the cold mask I recognized from business negotiations. What do you want, Dad? Why are you bringing this up now? Because I want the truth. I want an explanation. I want to understand how my own children could betray me this way. Betray you? Robert's voice rose. We saved you. You were living alone in that big house, having many strokes, falling down. You couldn't take care of yourself anymore. I had one TIA. One fall. I was recovering fine. The house was paid for. I had help coming in twice a week. I was managing. You were deteriorating, Emily insisted. The doctors said it would only get worse. We had to make decisions. Decisions that conveniently gave you access to millions of dollars? Robert slammed his hand against the steering wheel. That's enough. I won't be accused like this. Everything I've done has been legal. Everything has been for your benefit, for the family's benefit. Legal? I shook my head slowly. We'll see about that. Dr. Collins never examined me, yet somehow diagnosed me with dementia. That's fraud, Robert. And financial exploitation of an elder is both a civil and criminal offense in Pennsylvania. The color drained from his face. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you consequences, I replied calmly. Unless you can provide a better explanation than what I've heard so far. Emily was openly sobbing now, all pretense abandoned. You can't do this to us. What will people think? What about the children? What about them? What lesson do you think they're learning from watching you steal from your father? From abandoning me in a care facility and lying about my finances? We didn't steal anything. Robert shouted. It's family money. It's all staying in the family. Ah, but it's not your money, is it? Not yet. Not until I'm dead. A heavy silence fell over the car. The truth, finally, hung in the air between us. They had been spending their inheritance before I was gone. They had decided that since the money would be theirs eventually, they might as well use it now. They had weighed my remaining years against their immediate desires and found me wanting. Take me back, I said quietly. This conversation is over. Dad, please, Emily pleaded. Let's talk about this reasonably. We can work something out. Like moving me to Silver Palms now that you know I'm aware of the money? Too little, too late. What are you going to do? Robert demanded, not starting the car. I'm going to reclaim what's mine. Control of my finances. Control of my life. And you're going to face the consequences of your actions. You're making a mistake, he warned, his voice low and threatening. A costly one. No, I replied with absolute certainty. I made my mistake when I trusted you with my care and my money. I won't make it again. The drive back to Sunshine Meadows was silent and tense. They dropped me at the entrance without coming inside, without further discussion, without goodbye. As I watched the Mercedes pull away, I felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Only a deep, aching sadness for what had been lost. For the family we had once been. For the people I thought I had raised. But beneath the sadness was resolve. Steel hard and unwavering. I went directly to my room and called Gerald on the prepaid phone. It's time, I told him. They know I'm aware of everything. They'll move quickly now to cover their tracks or restrict my access even further. I understand, he replied. I'll file the emergency petition first thing in the morning. Dr. Kim's report is ready. We have enough to revoke the power of attorney and freeze the assets pending investigation. Good. And Gerald? No half measures. I want to pursue this to the fullest extent possible. Civil and criminal. Are you certain, William? Criminal charges would mean. I know exactly what it means, I interrupted. Do it anyway. After hanging up, I sat down at my small desk and began writing. Every detail of the conversation in the car. Every admission. Every threat. Every reaction. I wrote until my hand cramped, until every word was captured on paper while still fresh in my memory. Evidence. Ammunition. Truth. The next morning, Gerald filed the emergency petition to revoke the fraudulent power of attorney, along with a request to freeze all assets in Harrington Holdings LLC. By noon, a judge had granted both requests pending a full hearing. By evening, Robert was calling the nursing home in a fury, demanding to speak with me. I declined the call. 2 days later, the formal civil complaint was filed, alleging elder financial abuse, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conversion. The local district attorney's office, provided with our evidence, opened a criminal investigation for elder exploitation. The news spread quickly through our social circles. Former business associates called Sunshine Meadows asking to speak with me. Old friends sent cards expressing shock and support. Even some of the staff began treating me differently, with a new respect, tinged with pity and perhaps a touch of fear. After all, if my own children could be so calculating, what did that say about the vulnerability of all the residents in their care? A week after my birthday, Gerald arrived with news. The judge has granted our motion for an expedited hearing, he reported. Next Tuesday. And there's more, the DA's office has issued subpoenas for all financial records related to Harrington Holdings. They're taking this very seriously. As they should, I replied. What about Robert and Emily? Any response to the civil complaint? They've retained counsel. Bingham and Associates, expensive corporate lawyers, but not specialists in elder law. Their initial response is what we expected: denial of wrongdoing, claims that everything was done with your knowledge and consent, and assertions about your diminished capacity. I nodded, unsurprised. They'll stick to their story. That I'm confused. That I agreed to everything. But we have Dr. Kim's evaluation. And the fraudulent diagnosis from Dr. Collins, who never examined you, is a serious problem for them. The DA is investigating him separately for potential medical fraud. Good. I felt no joy in any of this, only grim determination. What else? There's a development you should know about, Gerald said hesitantly. Emily came to my office yesterday. Alone. This surprised me. What did she want? To negotiate. She claims she was manipulated by Robert, that she didn't fully understand what was happening with your finances. She offered to testify against him in exchange for immunity from criminal charges. A hollow laugh escaped me. Turning on each other already. How predictable. She seemed genuinely distressed. William said she's been unable to sleep since your confrontation. That she never meant for things to go this far. And yet she took the money. She spent it on her new car, her renovated kitchen, her vacations. She left me here believing I was nearly destitute. I shook my head firmly. No deals. She made her choices. Gerald nodded, respecting my decision. The hearing is Tuesday at 10 a.m. Are you ready to testify? More than ready. It will be difficult. Emotional. They'll try to portray you as confused, vindictive, unable to manage your affairs. Let them try, I said with quiet confidence. The truth is on my side. The day of the hearing dawned clear and bright. I dressed in my best suit, the one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral, now slightly loose on my frame after months of institutional food. Gerald had arranged for a private car to take us to the courthouse, bypassing the Sunshine Meadows transportation system that might have alerted staff to my legal proceedings. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Robert and Emily sat with their attorneys at one table, not looking in my direction as Gerald and I took our places at the other. Several journalists sat in the back. Elder financial abuse by family members had become a hot topic in recent years, and my case, with its significant dollar amounts and clear paper trail, had attracted attention. Judge Rebecca Harmon, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, called the court to order. We're here on the matter of Harrington versus Harrington, et al. This is a hearing on the plaintiff's motion to permanently revoke a durable power of attorney granted to Robert Harrington, and to return control of assets to William Harrington. Let's begin. Our case went first. Gerald methodically presented the evidence: the medical report from Dr. Kim showing no cognitive impairment, the fraudulent diagnosis from Dr. Collins, bank statements documenting the systematic withdrawal of funds for personal expenses, the incorporation documents for Harrington Holdings LLC created without my knowledge. Then it was my turn to testify. As I took the stand and was sworn in, I finally allowed myself to look directly at my children. Robert sat stone-faced, jaw clenched, eyes hard. Emily stared at the table, unable to meet my gaze. Mr. Harrington, Gerald began, Please tell the court in your own words what happened after your TIA episode last year. For the next 45 minutes, I detailed everything. The pressure to sell my home. The gradual isolation at Sunshine Meadows. The discovery of the bank statement. The confrontation during my birthday celebration. Throughout my testimony, I remained calm, factual, precise, the businessman I had been for decades, not the doddering patient they had tried to create. When cross-examination came, Robert's attorney tried every angle to discredit me. He questioned my memory. He suggested I had agreed to all financial arrangements but simply forgotten. He implied I was bitter about being in a nursing home and taking it out on my children. I countered each insinuation with specific facts, dates, and details. I referred to my written account of our car conversation, which had been entered into evidence. I remained unflappable even when he became aggressive in his questioning. Mr. Harrington, he finally asked in exasperation, if you're as mentally competent as you claim, why didn't you question these financial arrangements sooner? Why wait until now to raise concerns? Because I trusted my children, I replied simply. I believed they were acting in my best interest. I discovered the truth only when that bank statement was accidentally delivered to me. Until then, I had been repeatedly told that my funds were nearly depleted, that I could barely afford Sunshine Meadows, let alone anything better. And now you're pursuing criminal charges against your own flesh and blood. Doesn't that seem extreme? Vindictive, even? I looked directly at Robert and Emily as I answered. Actions have consequences. I taught them that as children. Apparently, the lesson didn't take. The judge called a brief recess before the defense presented their case. In the hallway, Gerald received a text message that made him raise his eyebrows. What is it? I asked. The DA's office. They've obtained emails between Robert and Dr. Collins discussing your diagnosis before you ever saw a doctor. Explicit instructions about what to include in the medical report. They're upgrading the potential charges to include conspiracy. I nodded, absorbing this information without surprise. The depth of the betrayal had ceased to shock me. When court resumed, the defense's case quickly fell apart. Their primary argument, that I had consented to all financial arrangements, collapsed under the weight of documentary evidence showing systematic deception. Dr. Collins, called as a witness, invoked his Fifth Amendment rights and refused to testify about the fraudulent diagnosis, devastating their claims about my mental capacity. By mid-afternoon, Judge Harmon had heard enough. I've reached my decision, she announced. The power of attorney granted to Robert Harrington is hereby revoked, effective immediately. All assets of Harrington Holdings LLC are to be frozen pending a full accounting and the resolution of the civil claims. Mr. William Harrington is determined to be fully competent to manage his own financial and personal affairs. She looked sternly at Robert and Emily. I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for further criminal investigation. The evidence presented today strongly suggests elder financial exploitation, fraud, and conspiracy. This court takes such matters extremely seriously. Relief washed over me, not joy, not triumph, but simple relief. The first step toward justice had been taken. As we prepared to leave, Emily approached, tears streaming down her face. Dad, please, she begged. Can we talk? Privately? I need to explain. There's nothing to explain, I cut her off quietly. Your actions have said everything I need to hear. But the criminal charges, do you know what this will do to us? To the grandchildren? You should have thought of that before you stole nearly $1 million from me and left me in a budget nursing home believing I was almost broke. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that. Robert controlled everything. He told me you wanted to help us. That you'd agreed to all of it. And you believed that? That I'd cheerfully fund your lifestyle while sitting alone in a tiny room, thinking I couldn't afford better care? She had no answer for that. Go home, Emily, I said wearily. Talk to your lawyer. Mine won't be offering any deals. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, financial investigations, and life changes. With my assets unfrozen and my competency legally established, I moved out of Sunshine Meadows into a comfortable apartment in a senior living community of my choosing, one with independence but support available if needed. The civil case moved forward, with forensic accountants tracking every dollar that had been diverted from my accounts. The criminal investigation resulted in indictments: Robert for elder financial exploitation, fraud, conspiracy, and wire fraud; Emily for lesser but still serious charges of conspiracy and receiving stolen property; Dr. Collins for medical fraud and conspiracy. The story made the local news, then national. I received letters from other seniors who had experienced similar betrayals, thanking me for fighting back, for shining a light on a type of abuse that too often remained hidden. Robert refused to speak with me, maintaining his innocence despite the mounting evidence. His investment firm placed him on administrative leave. His country club membership was quietly not renewed. Former business associates distanced themselves. Emily attempted reconciliation several times, each overture accompanied by excuses and rationalizations. I declined all meetings. Some wounds cut too deep for simple healing. 6 months after my birthday confrontation, both Robert and Emily accepted plea deals rather than risk trial. Robert would serve 18 months in a minimum security prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Emily received probation and community service. Both were ordered to make full restitution. The day of Robert's sentencing, I attended court, sitting silently in the back. Not to gloat, not to condemn, but to witness. To see justice completed. To close that chapter. As he was led away, handcuffed, he finally looked at me. In his eyes, I saw not remorse but resentment. Even now, he believed himself the victim. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall. Only sadness for what could have been. For the family we should have been. That evening, sitting in my new apartment, surrounded by the few treasured possessions I'd recovered, Margaret's reading chair, our vinyl records, the photographs of happier times, I poured a glass of the good scotch I denied myself at Sunshine Meadows. "We raised them better than this," I said to Margaret's photograph. "Where did we go wrong?" No answer came, of course. Some questions have no satisfying resolutions. My finances were restored, my independence reclaimed. The restitution payments would eventually recover most of what had been taken. But some losses can never be made whole. Trust, once shattered, leaves permanent scars. 3 years have passed since then. I've established new routines, made new friends in my community. I volunteer teaching financial literacy to seniors, helping them recognize and avoid exploitation. I've reconnected with old business associates and friends who had lost track of me during my Sunshine Meadows isolation. The grandchildren have been the most difficult aspect. They were innocent in all this, yet they too suffered consequences. After much consideration, I established trust funds for their education, accessible only at college age, with strict controls to prevent their parents from accessing the money. Robert was released after serving 15 months. He moved to Arizona, starting over with a new wife, a new job, a new life. We haven't spoken. I doubt we ever will. Emily has made tentative steps toward reconciliation. Monthly cards. Occasional emails. Last Christmas, she asked if she could visit. I declined, not yet ready, perhaps never ready. The betrayal was too fundamental, too calculated, too prolonged. Some afternoons, sitting on my balcony watching the sunset, I wonder if I did the right thing. If pursuing justice to its fullest extent was necessary. If forgiveness might have been possible. But then I remember those months at Sunshine Meadows, believing I was nearly destitute while they spent my money. I remember the cold calculation in Robert's eyes when confronted. I remember Emily's tears, not of remorse but of fear for the consequences. Actions have consequences. That principle guided my business for 45 years. It guided my parenting. And ultimately, it guided my response to their betrayal. I have no regrets. Justice was necessary. Boundaries were essential. Self-respect demanded nothing less. Today, I turned 71. There was no family gathering, no cake, no presents. Instead, I had dinner with Gerald Winters and his wife, who have become true friends. We talked about my recent trip to the Grand Canyon, about his grandchildren's achievements, about books we've read and music we've enjoyed. Not once did we discuss the case that brought us together. That chapter is closed. Written, but no longer read. I am William James Harrington. I built a business from nothing. I raised children who lost their way. I faced betrayal and fought back. I reclaimed my life. And I am not finished yet. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.